I never imagined that a simple car ride could shift everything I believed about myself, about family, and the boundaries I thought were clear. My name is Rachel, and I'm 43 years old. I married David when I was 36. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was slow, steady, and what I thought was safe. After years of heartbreak and near misses, I yearned for peace. David offered that. Stability. Routine. A quiet kind of love. What I didn't expect was his son, Ethan. At the time of our wedding, Ethan was only 15, a shy, sharp-eyed teenager with a coldness I mistook for teenage angst. He lived with his mother in another state, visiting only during holidays. Back then, I believed time would bridge the gap between us. But even years later, the gap remained. Widened, even. By the time he turned 21 and moved in with us to attend university, we were polite strangers. I tried. God knows I tried. I left notes on his desk during exam weeks, stocked his favorite snacks, asked about his classes. And yet, there was always this invisible wall. Not quite anger. Not quite indifference. Just distance. David, caught up in work and his own fatherly guilt, never noticed the tension. He assumed Ethan and I would eventually figure it out. But we never did. At least, not until that drive. It was an ordinary Wednesday. David had left that morning for a 2-day business trip. Ethan's car had broken down the night before, and I offered to pick him up after his late evening lecture. I thought it would be uneventful, just a quick drive, maybe a quiet dinner afterward. But something felt different even before he entered the car. He hesitated at the door, as if unsure whether he wanted to be alone with me. When he finally sat down, he didn't say a word for a long while. Just stared ahead, lost in thought. We drove in silence. 10 minutes in, as we passed a tree-lined street lit by scattered lamps, he finally spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" His voice startled me. He rarely initiated conversations, let alone something so personal. "I used to," I said honestly. "Especially when I first married your father. Everything felt borrowed." He looked at me then, really looked. "I feel like I'm constantly watching myself from outside," he said. "Trying to play the part. Be the perfect son. The good student. The respectful roommate." Roommate. That word hung in the air. I glanced at him. "You've never had to be perfect around me, Ethan." He gave a dry laugh. "No. Just invisible." That cut deeper than I expected. "I'm sorry," I said. "I never wanted you to feel that way." He turned his face toward the window. "It's not your fault. I think I made it hard. I didn't want to feel close to you." "Why?" I asked gently. "Because you're not supposed to care about someone that way. Not someone you shouldn't." The air shifted. Every sound, the tires on pavement, the ticking dashboard clock, grew louder in the silence that followed. I pulled over instinctively, heart pounding. "What are you trying to say, Ethan?" He didn't answer at first. Just stared ahead. Then finally he said it. "I've had feelings for you, Rachel. 4 years. I didn't know what they were at first. I tried to ignore them. But the older I got, the harder it became to pretend." My breath caught. In that moment, memories flooded in. Memories I'd buried. The long glances across the dinner table. The way his hands lingered when they brushed against mine. The subtle electricity I'd always dismissed. I had told myself it was just in my head. "I don't want to ruin anything," he added quickly. "I've kept it to myself. I needed to tell you. At least once. Even if it's the last time." I looked at him. Really looked. This was not a boy. This was a man, grappling with something far deeper than desire. It wasn't about sex. It was about connection. About years of silence, of wanting to be seen. And I had seen him. Long before I admitted it to myself. "Ethan," I began slowly. "What you're feeling, I don't judge you for it. Emotions don't follow rules. They creep in, quietly, sometimes where we least expect them. He turned toward me now. There was no seduction in his gaze, just vulnerability. But there are things we can feel, and things we must never act on, I continued. He nodded, almost gratefully. I know. I just needed you to know that it wasn't nothing, that you meant more than polite dinners and quiet mornings. Tears pricked my eyes, not from discomfort, but from the aching truth between us. I've seen you struggle, I said. I've watched you grow. I may not be your mother, Ethan, but I've cared about you more than I ever showed. I know. There was a pause. Then, to my surprise, he reached out, not to touch me, but to hold out his hand. A simple gesture. Human. Honest. I took it. We sat there, fingers interlaced, not as lovers, not as enemies, but as two souls that had finally dropped their masks. We didn't kiss. We didn't confess anything more. Sometimes, intimacy isn't in the physical. It's in the truth. We drove home without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. The memory of his words, his eyes, haunted me. But not in shame, in clarity. This wasn't about forbidden love. It was about misunderstood emotions. A bond twisted by silence, not by sin. From that day forward, something between us changed, not into something darker, but something stronger. We respected the line, but we also respected the connection. Ethan started talking more, helping more, opening up. And I stopped trying to be someone I wasn't. We found a balance. Not forced, not taboo, but deeply human. David never knew what happened in that car. He didn't need to, because it wasn't a betrayal. It was a moment of transformation. That moment in the car didn't just change how I saw Ethan. It changed how I saw myself. Sometimes, the most unexpected feelings are there to teach us, not tempt us, to remind us that we are layered, complex beings, and that love in all its forms deserves to be acknowledged and respected. And in doing so, we become more than we were, wiser, stronger, and more real.